Since 1973, Terrance Malick has been directing movies on an epic scale. The first one was Badlands, Days of Heaven, The Thin Red Line, and The New World. Now, we're into a new, different kind of movie that he has just completely laid out before us, and that's The Tree of Life. So stay tuned, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it. I really don't understand what it is about this movie. I went and saw it twice today, and the first time I saw it I was almost in tears at some parts because it was really emotional, and there are really no spoilers in this, so you don't have to worry about that, because the movie is just it's set along such on a basis that you really don't understand what is going on, but you do. It's set in past, present, and future. And I thought that that was so interesting because it jumps back and forth so many different times. You have the future, which is just something that's really kind of not a dark thing, but by the end of the movie, or by 3/4 of the way through, when things start to happen and they kind of go into an afterlife, it kind of impacted me a little bit. I was very interested in that. Also, it got to the point where when it was in the present, you see his life and kind of how things are really difficult with him and his wife, how, like, almost how his dad was with his mom, how Brad Pitt was with Jessica Chastain. Then you have the past, which there are two different pasts. One of the pasts is when they're boys, and one of the other pasts is when you find out that the middle brother has been killed. And I suspect that that was in Vietnam, because the time period, he was only 19 years old, and the whole movie is set basically in the 1950s in Waco, Texas. The thing is that I was kind of sitting there thinking about how my life was when I was a child, when I was younger at least, and I was just a little kid. Just the whole carelessness of all my situations, the whole playfulness that I had, the less serious of life that I was living. Also, there was the fact that my childhood was their childhood. It reminded me of them. It reminded me of myself, the movie did, and just how the kids acted, because we all did things that we weren't very proud of when we were children. But also, there's the fact that we all did stuff like that. We all blew frogs up on rockets, not per se like that, but we all did things like that, and that's what got me. That's what pulled me into the movie, and that's what held me tight going through this entire movie and kind of feeling the innocence of my childhood and where I was in life. That there was an electricity behind it, and it kept it going for me. I looked around in the theater while things were kind of going slower in the movie, but everybody was listening intently. The beauty of this movie was incredible. It was so largely set, but also it exuded all my expectations about what this movie was going to be. This movie was so intriguing, but it was so painful at the same time, because there were so many instances where I feel like I've been there before, or wow, like if I'm going to experience this, I'm gonna be up for a ride, because now we get into the emotional part, and when you have a brother die, or you have other family members die, or you have a friend die, or you have a father that is abusive, or you have a mother that is just so in tune with your life or in tune with everybody else, and you learn so much from her because of her love and her grace and her genuine love for everything. I think that was what connected me to this movie. Everything about The Tree of Life was perfect. I can't explain in words how this movie affected my life, because it got me to the point where I wanted to think about myself and about the things that I had done, but also how I can improve myself. Throughout this movie, you have such characters as RL, who is the middle brother who actually dies in Vietnam, and that's kind of what I suspected because of that time period. You also have Steve, and then you have Jack, who is basically the main character, where it shows him young as Hunter McCracken and old as Sean Penn. Then you have Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien. I love how it just says Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien. It doesn't have their first name. It's an all-American, how do you say, family, and they're not known by their first names. They're known by others as Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien, and they're known by their kids by father and mother, specifically father, and then mom. And it kind of caught me at that, and I really thought that that was so cool and so interesting, because it doesn't say names too much in the movie. You hardly catch RL, you hardly catch Steve. Jack is said a few times, and then possibly the kid named Tyler, who actually drowns a little bit further in the movie. It's kind of a sadder part, but those are really the only names that it even says aloud, and everything else is kind of kept like secret, because you don't need to know names, because these characters are you. They're strictly me, and that's what I felt so realistic about this movie, because it was a short connection of our lives and of their life, and actually just the experiences that they had were my experiences. I loved this movie because it showed the real childishness of everything. Just like I mentioned before, the childhood, the innocence, just everything about it. It gave me a sense of wonder and love for these characters, because my emotions were set so high in this movie. And eventually, in the end, I didn't want it to end. As daring as 2001: A Space Odyssey was, with its epic scale, with the views of everything, you got to the point where, when you were watching this movie, as soon as it starts, you find out that RL had died, and after that, it begins with the creation. Because you have these two different scientific views, like of the mom, she believes in God, solely in God. The father, he's kind of a more, I kind of assumed, scientific person. So you have these two clashing, and that's why in the trailer it kind of mentions mother, father. Always you wrestle inside me, and always you will. And I thought that that was so neat, how their characters clash to make the boy, Jack, who he is today. But as it starts out with the creation, it spends at least 20 to 25 minutes actually going through the universe on these epic scales, playing classical music from Alexander Desplat's soundtrack that he wrote specifically for this, but Bedřich Moldai doing Smetana. And you were just so interested in this. You saw everything moving, and it got so epic. It got to the point where the creation happened, where volcanoes were splurting, even showed dinosaurs, and then the first molecules growing together, and then humans came, and that was us. And it showed them back in the 1950s, and their growing, and their birth, and just their life. One of my favorite scenes in the movie was right after the second boy had been born, and Jack is looking at this baby, and it was just so natural. And you saw this little boy so confused and so emotionally struck looking at this child, looking at this baby. And Jack, in his own life, he is only 2 years old, 3 years old, and there was a connection there. And just the beauty of everything, it just almost put me in tears. As I mentioned before, there's not going to be really any spoilers in this, because you can't really spoil a movie that is so hard to understand, but it's so simple to comprehend. It kind of interested me in so many things, because there was hardly dialogue, and I loved it. Because you saw the emotion on some of their faces, and the music just playing. and you knew exactly what those characters were feeling. You knew exactly what was going on, but it was so hard to comprehend, and it was so sometimes heartbreaking to watch things happen, and just the anger, yet the love, yet the frustration and the sadness that was shared throughout the film from the characters to you, because the acting was so genuine. The way that Terrance Malick actually filmed it was he didn't get the script for the kids, he told them what to say. And the kids, I think, had a lot more feeling because they knew what they were saying instead of just reading it off a page. Now, you have the adults who actually had read the script, and that script, all it said was just act natural. And that's what Terrance Malick wanted. He wanted them to act natural throughout this movie so that we could have a better understanding of what those feelings were, why these adults, why these parents were actually feeling this way. And that's what got me. Because no film has ever been filmed like that other than 2001: A Space Odyssey, with the spectacular views, with the wide scale of everything. There were moments where words did not need to be said, and all it was silence. And you saw the determination in the looks on their faces, and you just understood what they were doing or what they were feeling and what their goal was. The movie was set in a time period when all you had to do was look out your window and see these kids playing outside in the front yard, making sure that they were there and nothing was going wrong. That was a careless time in the 1950s. Everything was okay. A lot of things were so safe. And it kind of pulled me away from the situations that are right now, kind of the more difficult things. And not that I don't want to experience them, but, you know, like, back then, things seemed so much better, seemed so much cleaner, seemed so much more innocent. And now things are just so, in this world that we live in, it's so dangerous. It's so harsh. And that's what makes me really sad. But anyways, being back in the 1950s and actually seeing that and feeling as if I was there, it made me hunger for that even more. And so it was such an innocent time that I loved it so very much. And the last thing I have to say is that I want to see this again. About this, when the DVD comes out, afterwards they're going to have a 6-hour special edition cut, which I am very excited for. 6 hours, that's a very long movie. That is one movie that is that. It's not split up as a miniseries, it's one movie. And I bet that that's probably one of the longest movies that will be ever made. And I hope it is. And I know that I will be able to sit through it and just watch it, because it was incredible. 2.5 hours was not enough. I was eating it up and I wanted more. So go out, watch this movie, watch The Tree of Life. I know that you'll love it, and I know that there will be a lot of emotion behind it that you will enjoy. The scenes were spectacular. I want this to be an IMAX theater so I can see it on a larger scale. Just one more thing. There is a part in the afterlife that I actually kind of got into. And it is when Sean Penn's character Jack actually goes and sees his family that has already passed on, and he sees his little brother RL again. And when he goes up and gives him a hug and he takes him to his mom, I'm starting to get emotional right now because it was such a special part, and I felt that emotion so strong, and it was like a punch in the stomach, and I was almost in tears. I was like on the verge, and I feel like that right now. And he goes and sees the rest of his family, and they're together again. And that was the future part. There's the past, present, and future. And I loved it. It did so much for me. So I want you guys to let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think about The Tree of Life in the comments below. I want to hear what you have to say, because this movie actually changed my life, and I hope it changes yours, because it was just so incredibly epic. It was so incredible on a large scale. So that's it. Have fun, you guys. Take a look at this movie, and have a great night.